Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Northern Showcase. We look forward to spending some time with you. And I'm Penny Olorenshaw. I'm a former stage manager, now a Webflow developer in Trenton, Ontario, and I handle communications for No Code North.
And I'm Jeremy LaRue, a Webflow and low-code developer from Vancouver. On the No Code North team, I'm the resident automations guy and the stream runner.
Hey, I'm Maggie. I'm a Webflow developer based in Toronto with a background in film and television. In our No Code North group, I take care of our designs and our gather space.
Our mission at No Code North is twofold. First, to build a community of Canadian Webflowers and no-code enthusiasts. And second, to showcase that Canadian talent to the rest of the world. We host workshops, demos, and panel discussions on Fridays at noon Eastern in our lodge, our gather space. And once a month, we host the Northern Showcase here on our YouTube channel.
And we always love to see folks joining us in the chat. And today, Dale's with us. And I know that lots of folks will also be watching this in replay and will be joining us as we go along. So hi, Dale. Good to see you back again. And I'm going to just tell you that if you have any questions for our guest, put them in the chat, or we'll ask them, and we'll ask them either during the interview or at the end.
Today, we're joined by Mark Ralph. Animations, big typography, and engaging layouts are a staple of Mark Ralph's work. Standing up to a sea of boring templates, he decided to go big on outstanding designs and build a business out of it. So let's introduce Mark Ralph, a highly talented and seasoned Webflow designer and developer based in Toronto. Hey, Mark.
Hey,
hello,
nice to
Mark.
see you.
Good to see you too.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just.
Oh, good. It's going to be one of those days.
Oh, we did well this morning.
That, like, Mark, Penny and I met you first in person at an awards conference in Toronto maybe a couple of years ago, was it?
Yes. Yeah, that's like the one and only Webflow event that I've been to. Or I guess it wasn't a Webflow event, but they had that like pre-party. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. It was great to meet you guys. And I had really not engaged with the community at all. And yeah, it was an awesome experience. I'm glad we're able to chat again today.
Mm-hmm.
My memory of that is that you were in a corner, very much looking like you belonged, very professional. And then there was another after party where Vlad Magdalene was supposed to be there. And we had barely spoken, but all of a sudden you were there too. And you're still, again, looking like you belonged.
Yeah.
This guy that happens to be exactly where he's supposed to be.
It was such a wild ride, to be totally honest. Like I only, like Webflow had that, pre-party thing. I can't remember what it was. And Max was the one who had invited me. And I kind of just I can't remember when it was, but I just got this email from Max, Max Lind, who I'd never really spoken to before. And I went to that. And then I met Hannah from H Labs and Keith. And, I just met a bunch of people. And Hannah was the one who got me into that other party. It just, everything seemed to kind of work. And then I was, in a car with McGuire, and who I had never met before, and obviously had seen him and all that. We were taking a taxi together. It was just I don't know. It was kind of a wild experience. It went from 0 to 100 really quickly.
Okay, maybe that's the icebreaker. What's the story there? I didn't know that. Anything?
What's that?
You sharing a cab with McGuire.
It wasn't really anything. I went to, there was that, I think that other party that you're talking about. Hannah had somehow got me. She had known somebody else who was there who had who was able to get me into that, event. And then I was talking with Max and Skylar, who I had just met. And then they were then I think we back up with you guys at the brewery. And they were just oh yeah, you want to take a cab? And I was like, sure. And then McGuire got in, and I think Emily was, it was just wild,
Yeah.
Right place, right time.
I just kind of pretended like I belonged there, exactly like you said, trying to fit right in.
It felt like you appeared mysteriously and then you disappeared just as mysteriously, and we hadn't heard of you for another year.
Yeah. And because, most of us knew each other at least through Twitter or whatever at that point, or through, meeting up on live streams. But You were just this
I was just
other
the guy who should, yeah, who's hanging around. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it
So I
was fun
think
though. Yeah. I didn't
yeah.
end up getting a tattoo though. I remember Keith and Gilmore, they got the Webflow tattoo. Thankfully, I didn't go to that part of it. But I'm sure I would have felt peer pressured into that if I was there.
Probably. And then of
Yeah.
course then they changed the logo. So now
Yes. Yeah.
Like the
those
weekend.
tattoos.
Yeah.
Those tattoos are just historical now.
Yeah.
Anyway, Maggie, I think you have a whole bunch of questions for Mark. So why don't Jeremy and I just kind of back away and let you guys get into the conversation?
All right.
Sounds good. So yeah, as I was saying, we don't see you online all that much except for regular rare sightings of shoutouts from Webflow or other platform for some amazing work that you've done. It always looks amazing. It's usually a single post once every year or a year and a half. and then you know the next one's gonna be in the wild. So yeah, and then I forget why, but recently I remade the connection and thought we should definitely have you on the stream because we also don't do a lot of animation and layout ones. Lately, it's been a lot of automations and I thought maybe it'd be a good time to have a guest who's heavy on layouts and animations. So yeah, and then we had a pre-interview chat where we were talking a little bit about this interview and thought it would be a good idea to divide it in maybe use cases of your work because some of them are very interesting because like Arcanium was one of the work that you've linked to Shopify, and we want like it'd be interesting to talk about that one. Then there's some animation heavy ones. So but before we get into that, let's talk about your design background a little bit. So what did you study? How did you get to using Webflow?
Sure. Yeah. So I like going back to what I studied is I actually studied advertising at OCAD here in Toronto. That's where I'm still based. So that's actually what I went to school for. And like, you know, and I feel like it has kind of influenced my work, you know, up until this date. It's very much like still like a design focused program, but, you know, the idea always came first. It was very conceptual. You know, there was a lot of brand strategy and then, you know, trying to determine an insight and build a campaign around that. And that's certainly still kind of what I bring to my work today. And what, you know, I try to do is kind of develop whatever that insight or whatever that compelling, you know, story is that, you know, at least what I try to do, you know, it doesn't always work, but is to generate some sort of like emotional impact that will be memorable for the user. And that's kind of, you know, I think that came from that advertising background, more of that conceptual side. So yeah, I went to school for that. I had actually worked in advertising as an art director for a little bit. And even just through, you know, even when I was in school, like advertising is not as design focused, but I was always interested in graphic design. When I went into, when I worked in advertising, I worked as an art director and then just, I guess through interest or skill set, ended up working on a lot of interactive projects. So a lot of like microsites, that kind of stuff, but still just as a designer. So I would work, you know, more in that traditional designer developer team. But yeah, still kind of conceptual microsite type work. And then I decided I've been freelancing since 2013, I think. So yeah, so like, or 2014 maybe. I decided to kind of go out on my own. Advertising wasn't quite for me. You know, I did really like the design side of things and I don't know, the hours. And so I just decided that I was going to go freelance. And it just kind of worked out. And then I would say through that is I first started working in advertising. And then as I built up more of my client list, I was doing a lot of branding work. And with that is a lot of people wanted websites, obviously, as a part of that, working with kind of like small to medium businesses and whatnot. So it kind of pulled me into that. And that's, I kind of started working in, you know, other platforms or working with developers. And once I found Webflow, it was obviously, you know, the right fit. I feel like there's a lot of creative Webflow developers who've kind of followed that same path. You know, it really bridged that gap so you could do everything end to end.
When did you find Webflow?
I think the first time I saw it was maybe like in 2016, I think. like through an ad online.
Wow.
And the first time that I used it for a client project, when it was able to kind of like sell it, was maybe end of 2017, I think.
Mm.
It had always, when I first saw it, it was always something that I was interested in, but it was so new at the time. It was kind of, and I was working with kind of bigger clients at that time, so it was hard to sell in. But then, yeah, once it got going, it just kind of all moved forward from there. I feel like.
Did you try to make websites with other platforms before, or were you collaborating with developers and you were just doing the designs?
No, yeah, I worked with early on like Squarespace. Obviously, the limitations of that you hit like really quickly, and then it was mostly WordPress. So either like WordPress themes, they kind of have their page builder tools and stuff, and then any customization. Yeah, I'd work with other developers, or I worked. One of my big clients kind of coming out was like We or Me to We, Free to Children. We Day. I don't know if you know. They were kind of that big organization. They kind of got into a bit of that scandal with the government, so I don't think they exist in Canada anymore. But,
I'm gonna have to look it up. I might have missed it.
Yeah. We Day was like a huge event. They would have it down at like Scotiabank. So it's a pretty big organization, and I had so I would work with their development team there. I kind of led the redesign of all of their web properties at one point. Yeah, so that was all on WordPress, and can't remember what else, but yeah.
Blurred. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to start with talking about that background advertising, because as an art director, because I feel like a lot of your designs are centered around like the story associated with the project, and it kind of defines a lot of the look of it, the animation of it, and the experience that a person the user would have going through the site, essentially. So it all kind of stems from that. So it's interesting to have that background.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a big, it's definitely a big part of my process. Is the story is I always find the most important part. Like if we're not leaving the user with some sort of impression to kind of take away about the brand or whatever, I feel like that's just one of my goals, I guess, is always to effectively communicate some type of, narrative or whatnot. And it's definitely a part of my process when I'm working with my clients.
So maybe we could start looking into some of the use cases here. And I should have tested this before. So maybe, Jeremy, if I messed this up, maybe you can jump in. But so the first one, maybe I'll just give the URL so everyone can follow. The first one is Arcanium. And that's one of the, maybe it's not the most recent, but that was one of the big shout outs you got from Webflow, is it? Or was it from...
I think Shopiflow actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that one, let's talk about that one. I would love to know a little bit about if there was how you approached learning Shopiflow, if it was difficult, what were some of the problems you had, or none at all, and the things you really liked about it. And while you start talking about that, I will figure out how to. There.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so with that project, Arcanium was a startup, so I had been approached. It was actually a referral project brought from a designer that I often collaborate with. So he was doing all the branding, and he had kind of introduced me to the project. So they were launching with one product, and then they were going to add a couple SKUs on at a later date. So we were really looking for a platform that could obviously effectively manage the e-commerce side of things, but also with so few SKUs it is a furniture product, but I think they really were much more influenced by kind of tech or, more, what would you say, like more innovative, hardware companies or automotive companies and stuff like that, is they wanted it to kind of have that emotional side of it as well. So when it came down to kind of choosing Shopify, Shopify in itself is not necessarily really great at that, or it's much harder to execute, those types of sites directly within Shopify. So that didn't really feel like a good fit. And then, I had seen Shopiflow, and we'd also looked at that time. Udesly had that theme builder for Shopify as well. Those were two kind of things that we were looking at. So yeah, it was a great client. They were very comfortable kind of doing a little bit of exploration on the platform. Because when we started this project, Shopify was still very much kind of developing new features, and their team was amazing as well as working through this project. They would launch new features as we were going that my client kind of really wanted to have a part of the project, like account access, all within designed within Webflow and managing your account and whatnot. So it was nice, because they didn't have that when I had pitched it, but, collaborating with their team as they were, shared with me that they were working on that, and that they were confident that it would be delivered by the time that this project needed to go live. So, it was really a great experience working with the Shopify team, and they made it honestly really easy. I can't imagine doing an e-commerce site really any other way. And I think it's because with the Arcanium site is, again, another kind of key objective with it, what the client is they kind of wanted more of that Apple approach. They wanted to build an emotional connection to the product while also having a very clear and simple, checkout and buy page. So within Arcanium is we kind of, for the tables, we have an explore page and a buy page, which is something that you see, Apple obviously always does that with their products. You have, the pages that have all the animations and everything that kind of tell the story of the product. Then when you're actually going to purchase it, it's a very simple kind of configurator. So they wanted that type of experience, and there wasn't really a simple e-commerce solution that would offer that. So this kind
and were they aware of the design flexibility that Webflow offers? That why they were probably easy to convince to go the Webflow and Shopify connection there?
Yeah, they weren't even aware of Webflow, honestly, when they had approached me for the project. But just a really amazing client. I love working with that team. They're very collaborative, and we did some demos and stuff to kind of build a bit of confidence. But they were just just a great client to work for. So it was really an easy sell, I found, which was good. And I'm so glad that we went that route, because now obviously seeing the end result, I don't think, certainly I wouldn't have been able to develop this for them in Shopify, and I think they would have struggled to find a team to do it at the price point, to do it within Shopify.
Yeah. So for someone who would like to get started with a Shopify integration, do you have any advice on anything to be aware of before they head in, or?
No, I don't know. Not really. I haven't actually used, I know Shopify has a version 2.0, which is not what this site is built on. I haven't worked in that, but they have good demo stores and stuff. I think you just kind of dig into the documentation, but once you go through it, it's really not that complicated. You're basically building the pages, and they have kind of, if you use the Shopify app, they have the pre-built components that you can just drop right into Webflow that already have all the, it's attribute driven, right? So it's just adding the right attributes to different elements in Webflow. And yeah, it just, like anything, give yourself some time to learn it, but I would definitely encourage people to try it out. I think it's definitely I don't know how many people are using it, but from my experience, it's, I think, the best e-commerce solution for small to medium businesses, even large businesses, at this point that I can really think of, especially if, budgets for the project are not unlimited, because e-commerce can, get expensive.
Let's look for, I just have a couple questions about the animations themselves here. I'm gonna share again. Was I sharing earlier?
It was up there for a little bit, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Let's try this again. You're seeing this? Everyone seeing this?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so here, I'm just curious about this one. How did you do this one?
So it's just an image sequence, similar to the way that Apple does it. I'm pretty sure. It's just it's just that one is a.
So is it like a GSAP scrub through a whole bunch of images?
Yeah, GSAP scroll trigger animations. Yeah, you're just kind of scrubbing through, and it's just changing, the
so
images.
sweet. It's so nice. I do also really love how simple and elegant and sophisticated this is. Like this is beautiful.
Yeah.
Was the client able to get to do this video, and then you were able to divide? I did one scrub and like a GSAP scrub animation on a video once, and there's quite a bit of prep before getting to this point. Just getting all the images or the video divided in 100 images essentially. Yeah.
So we worked with a 3D artist to produce it, and I can't remember. It's not actually that. I think it's in Adobe Premiere where you can just kind of, I think you can export as frames.
I think that's what I did.
Yeah, it wasn't that that complicated, I don't think. Or I don't know if that's a lot. I can't remember exactly. I should have looked in. Yeah, but it wasn't too tough. It was just kind of making sure that the animation needs to come off the bottom, and it needs to kind of have that crop and make sure that it would work on all screen sizes. I guess it kind of lends it, the orientation of how it kind of rolled in and everything. We wanted to make sure that it still had an impact on mobile, because obviously then you're in portrait orientation, and if it was too small, it would kind of feel weird. There'd be so much empty space. Yeah,
and that's GSAP, right? That one.
Yeah, I believe this site I used a combination of GSAP and Webflow interactions, because this site launched maybe 2 years ago, and at that point, that's when I was kind of just starting to learn GSAP.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of at the same. We have the same evolution, because I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what Timrick's video you used as a.
Oh yeah, exactly. I feel like we're all kind of at the same stage, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're all.
I did the same GSAP scrub on a video.
Yeah.
Based on the same Timrick's tutorial, and they look amazing. And they work well, and and now it's gonna get even easier now that GSAP's being integrated in Webflow. You excited for that?
Yeah, I am excited. I'm really excited to see what the interface is like, and I guess how much of GSAP we're going to be able to use within whatever this interface is.
Yeah. Did you try the free plugins a little bit now that they're straight in Webflow, like split text and all of that?
I haven't actually. So the funny thing is, I just started a new contract. I haven't really done any web work so far, even in 2025, as I've done branding projects. They were supposed to lead to web work, but things had happened. So yeah, I actually feel quite behind on a lot of these new feature releases and stuff. I have gone back through in a lot of my client sites that I've just turned on the GSAP source rather than having it in code, just because I feel like that's probably better. But no, I haven't played around with anything because I did branding, and then I was on a pat leave. So I haven't done a project in 5 months, but I feel so far behind already. Things move
oh my God, if you take a week
fast.
Off, lately, if you take a week off, you feel so overwhelmed. But anyways, that's another subject. I feel like are feeling this overwhelmed. At least we're not alone. But I think you're not missing out really yet. The iX3 is not out yet, and the thing that's convenient for, I don't know if you had a paid subscription, but you used to have to upload the paid plugins as there's a little hack in Webflow. You had to upload them as text, and then link them that way in the code, and now you so that it's a lot easier now. You don't have to do that. You can just turn on the previously paid plugins. It's a lot easier. iX3 not quite here yet. So let's move on to some other projects that do not use Shopify or Shopify, but are really interesting in terms of layouts and animation. And I think as when we talk about animation, there's always this, it's always a bit contentious in this community because a lot of people use them wrong. A lot of people just add random animations. There's not a lot of thought behind them, and so they get a bad rep. But your animations, and probably because you're a background in advertising and as an art director, there's a lot of prep work. There's on like the actual story of the project and what you want to convey, and it really shows in the animation. They're very purposeful. Is that a word?
Yeah.
They have a lot of purpose.
I'm
And
so glad that comes through.
so sorry.
Because that is certainly my approach. I mean, you guys, you know, in the intro, you're talking about like, you know, animation stuff. I would say it's not something that I always seek to do in a project. I'm not like, but again, like my goal with any project that I work with a client is really just effective storytelling and creating that emotional impact. And I think animation is certainly one of the tools that can help in that that communication. So that's why, you know, I implement it, but it's not like, I mean, I'm sure I've done it, but I try not to use animation as kind of decoration, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or, you know, or I'll have simple rules like one of my things constraints that I tend to keep to is I'm always like either text or imagery animates, but not both. Like I like to have kind of one element always on the page that kind of carries you through it so that you don't need to like, because when everything's animating, you know, it can be a bit hard to know where to focus. And, you know, so that's kind of one constraint I sometimes apply to projects to limit, because you can do such cool things, but if it's not purposeful, if it's not, you know, leading up to make a positive impression, you know, I don't, you know, I try to stay away from that.
I haven't heard that, but that's actually a really interesting principle to make sure that it's either text or image, video, or elements that animate and keep and just not have all at the same time. Because it's kind of nice to have something that anchors you into the page as you go, and just have those other ones alternating, but not have everything animating, so that the user's not overwhelmed. I'm gonna borrow that.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like a simple rule that I've found has worked. Like I think people could certainly break it in certain instances, and I've seen great animations that break that. But for me, if I'm like wondering, that's just that's where I always start. I'm like, you know, have that anchor.
I feel bad. I know it's going to break the interview a little bit, but I just want to bring up one last question about the previous bit there, just because our friend Dale is working on his son's e-commerce store, and he just had one last question about about what we were talking about previously. I'm currently using Smoothify and Shopify, wondering if you considered this direction.
Yeah, so I haven't, since Smoothify has come out, I haven't done, you know, a headless e-commerce site. So I haven't used it before. I have looked into it. It certainly, you know, seems like a good tool. And I know Udesly, who is behind it, you know, they had kind of that previous Shopify theme builder. So I think feature-wise, it's very similar to Shopiflow. But I haven't used it specifically. But from what I've seen, it looks good. Yeah. I think they kind of have feature parity in a lot of ways.
Yeah. If anyone has used both, let us know, because we're always up for workshops. So it'd be kind of cool to do one comparing the two. So back to animations now. Maybe we could start by sharing one of those. Do you want, and I kind of wanted to showcase some of your animation work that's way more subtle and still brings a lot, and some of the ones that are not subtle, but that just have a little bit more of make more of a statement. But maybe let's start by the subtle one. You did get a shout out for that one. I forget from whom, but it's Craze.
Which project? Craze.
So let me share that one. And I really liked that one because the animations were really subtle. And here, screen. There it is. Okay, so there's a little bit of a like, and then like you said, like the text doesn't animate too much. There's this, it's tiny, but it's so cool. Look at that.
Yeah, like, and it turns into a box.
It's a little box. It's awesome. And then text isn't overwhelming, like it's not moving all over the place. And then
and then in this one at the bottom, I don't know if people I was like, it reveals, they were meant to kind of look like books, and like when you look on a shelf and you get little pages that show up. I always thought that one was cool. But yeah, I mean, so this client had, again, and maybe I could kind of we could take a step back into a bit of my process generally when working with clients. So I always get like my clients to just write me, a story about their business. And I feel like, that story can be very effective on the homepage, but also can be extrapolated to other parts of the site as well. And, I feel like a lot of times when they just write that down, I'm not generally, don't give any direction on what form it will take. I feel like a lot of clients sometimes generate more to like typical, like they've seen websites before and they, break it out that way. But sometimes they'll write me like a short story, or sometimes, it can be a little bit more creative in a way. And that's where I feel like some of those visual, bringing the text to life, or, visual representations, or even that interactive part at the top there where you kind of drag in all the different job descriptions, that actually came out of the fact that they had a bit of a unique business model. And there are some, that was essentially, they wanted to attract startups, or like small to, or like medium-sized businesses who were looking to who didn't maybe have like an internal creative team, were looking to make that first hire, but had ambitions that required, maybe not just a graphic designer, but video or illustration or something. And their kind of approach was, rather than hiring one person for, X amount of money for whatever their salary is, bring us on as your agency on a retainer that would be the same amount, and we can deliver you all of the things that you're looking for. And then they would kind of try to build their agency relationship out of that. And I'm sure try to grow, how much money they would make from their customers that way. So that kind of, that all grew out of that first question. And then even on that site, you can't navigate to it, but we did like landing pages that were, meant to kind of be an SEO play, where it would be targeting job descriptions for a lot of those jobs that are listed there in those bubbles. So it'd be like, for companies who are looking to write a job description for a graphic designer, and you would land on that page and it would basically have a button that you could copy and steal the job description, but then it linked down and it was like, or you can hire us. And, it's just, again, a bit of like a surprise and delight. I feel like there's all these like very technical parts of web design, like SEO, all that kind of stuff, but there's so much opportunity in creativity to kind of like flip that a bit. Like, and SEO is really about reaching people where they are. And, and I feel like you can add creativity with those kind of insights, like somebody who's like looking for a starter job description, and then we kind of like flip it on them. That's how you can really create that lasting impact, that even after they leave the site, maybe you're still holding a little bit of space in their mind as they make this business decision,
Yeah, capturing their attention by doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. Clever, insightful. That's really what makes things memorable. But yeah, that was just pretty simple. That's all done in, the top part is not, that was custom JavaScript. But yeah, the rest of that site's just all Webflow interactions.
And so for something like this and the next ones that we're going to see, in terms of your design process, because a lot like the regular design process, you start with the wireframes and maybe like a hi-fi wireframe, but you're a little bit locked into some specific components. But because your components don't always fit into what everyone's using, like, do you kind of work the design around the animations and the ideas that you've had, or how does your design process go?
Yeah, I would say my design process is not quite so regimented. I really appreciate like a blank canvas. For me, like efficiencies in my process come more through like framework rather than like formula, I guess, to make it sound cool, like alliteration or whatever. But like I've never used Reloom, for instance. I think it's an amazing platform. I think what they do is really incredible. But, for my process is I feel like we really need to start kind of from a blank canvas and see what we can create. A lot of my work still falls into traditional layouts and structures that you see on the web. But I try to at least give myself the opportunity to think of something outside of that. So when it comes to like wireframing, I certainly do wireframes, but when like for that hero section, for instance, like I would move into prototype pretty quickly so that we could evaluate for like those high impact areas where I am going to do animation. I will create a prototype so we can evaluate that pretty quickly. So I don't it's not always so structured, because like that we sign off fully on wireframes. I definitely work a little bit more fluid, because I think when it comes to those high interest areas, you need to experiment a bit. You can't, it's hard to say from the very beginning, like, I know what's going to work, until you build it and test it.
Yeah. And if it's not going to work, you want to figure that out early on. So you can
exactly. You don't want to sell something you can't end up making, for sure.
Yeah. So maybe let's take a look at the next ones. We can start with Hardware Club, which had a couple iterations. So we'll look at the first one, because the first one had some really interesting animation. So here, let me share that one.
Sure.
And here we go. So yeah, this is the first one, and it's not what's live these days, but this had a really interesting flow. So as you've got all these different these little custom cursors, and then right here, once you get past that, doors opening. I remember seeing it back then. It was really cool.
Yeah. So this one's all, and then I don't know, if there's a bit of a parallax effect in the doors here, which was a thing that I kept fussing over, that I don't know if anybody notices, but the background moves a little faster, if you're actually looking through a door, But yeah, so one of my old partner in advertising, this is actually her agency. So when she was starting this agency, she had reached out to me, and this is one of those examples where, she's a copywriter and an art director. I think those are just all anchors. Yeah. It's just a one page, but she's a copywriter. So she kind of wrote this, felt like more like a bit of a short story about the agency. And then, there was the idea, I think it's in that text there, that was breaking down, knocking down at their expensive door. So I just really like this idea of, kind of bringing that to life and using color and just simple design to really, to just bring that text to life. And again, it was definitely a bit of a different process, a lot of design experimentation. But yeah, I remember, so this is one of my old, this site is maybe 2019, I think, is when this site came out. But it's all just in Webflow interactions. And I had actually, this is the site that I've got the most attention from. And I'm a part of, I don't know what it's called, but Timothy Ricks's Patreon group, but with the Webflow Wizards group. I've been there for a while. But I had done this, and I kind of posted in there. I was like, does anybody think that this is good enough to be worth sharing? And so I had submitted it to some awards, because I think it had organically just popped up in the Webflow showcase almost a year after it went live. It was so weird. I'm not great at promoting myself, but it kind of just happened organically. And when it got kind of picked up, I got tons of interest. It was great. Should have learned from that and probably shared out my work more since then, but I have not. But yeah.
I think if all your leads already come organically from referral, I don't think there's that much of a point. I think sharing is great if that's where you get most of your leads, but if you only network.
I got so many leads after that project. It was on Musely, and it didn't win an award, or award with the 3 W's, but CSS winner or whatever. I don't know. Tim Timothy Ricks had recommended some things for me to submit it to. But yeah, I got like leads for maybe a couple months. I would get like multiple a week, but they didn't lead to like a ton of new work. Definitely referrals is how my business has grown. Just having that trust, and then also like you kind of have that trust baked in, and then also budget expectations and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's another one I really love. We'll share that one now. It's called the salmon.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know why. Every time there's a website about fish, it's always a little different. Like Marcel has one too that's really cool about Canadian fish. But yeah, this one's so cool. Look at that. Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of a wild site. So this is for like a video production company here in Toronto. So 2 directors, they're like super funny, very creative, which in a way kind of made the project very challenging because they kind of had, sometimes it gets a hiccup on there, but it was a lot more abstract. Some of the design influences were like Criterion Collection DVD menus. They wanted like the brand is supposed to like, it's all kind of bizarre. Like it's this fish painting that they had purchased. And they had like these like film noir influences. That's why it's kind of all black and white. So it's a lot more abstract. And we broke a lot of rules. Like when you land on the page, there's nothing but a fish picture.
This is awesome.
Is one thing I had flagged with them. I was like, best practices, we should probably have a navigation. We should probably have some sort of call to action. They were like, no, we just want the fish. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But yeah, so this one is all GSAP and Swiper for like the director light boxes. Like if you go to those pages, but I did the branding for it, and kind of that fish animation grew out of like a couple, like when I was doing the branding, I just kind of put that fish scale image fill on the logo. And I was like, oh, this looks cool. And then we were kind of like, oh, well, maybe we could do like it kind of coming behind the text. And they really wanted background video for all the directors. So like in that section when you...
Right. The individual ones or...
Yeah, so this is like the blog. So if you go back to when it had all their names.
Oh, right. This one, the hover videos there.
Yeah, so you can click on them and it'll go to like the first one maybe.
Oops. Okay.
So that's fine. So it takes you to like the director's reel because their customer base is basically creative teams at ad agencies essentially because they mostly just work on commercials. So so you can click through. So this is like the most complicated light box that I've built, and I certainly couldn't have done it without the help of Tim Ricks. But yeah, you can. So if you click on one of them, it'll play the video, but it like automatically plays the video. Automatically plays the video. We're doing like a custom Vimeo embed there, so you don't have to do the double click. And then if you scroll through here and you close it, it closes back on the right one. So it's kind of like tying.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
and it's there's more than one project too.
Yeah, so this is like a slider for their entire reel, like this director, all the spots for this director.
Whoa, wow. How long did it take you to develop something like this?
This project was like, was kind of on and off for a long time. So it's not like a fair.
Okay.
But like the actual development time when I would say when it kind of got more serious was maybe like 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks involved. Okay, I'm just gonna show this one more time because I really love this part.
So yeah, we use Lennis in this. This is like the multiverse salmon was the concept.
Oh, I love it. How do you do this?
So it's just like an image sequence similar to the thing on the Arcanium.
Yeah.
So actually we were working with a design team as well, and like a design agency, and somebody there had created all these different versions of the fish. to use. So yeah, it's just it's kind of because it's an endless scroll site, right? So it just continues to go with Linus. So yeah, that was just kind of a funny little thing. They liked kind of just weird little references, and I think I had mentioned to you in our call is if you stay on that site for maybe 13 minutes, there's actually like a old school DVD screensaver that shows up of their logo that bounces, that changes color. Because again, we kind of had that DVD menu reference. So there's like Easter eggs and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun to work on, but certainly being more abstract and less focused also made it creatively very challenging, I would say, you know.
Yeah, there's a question from Patrick. How do you balance abstract work with rule breaking? With the salmon you mentioned, it was client request, but do you ever push back?
Oh yeah, of course. But like push back in what way? I think it's my responsibility to flag certain things, like flag best practices, flag those kind of things. But at the end of the day, like, I would, I feel like I don't know, it's hard to say this. There's obviously very important rules for web design and best practices exist for a reason. But I also feel like we need to leave a little bit of space for websites to be as unique as the businesses might be, right? Like every business is a bit unique in its own way. And if they, they are very creative, they like to break rules and stuff. I feel like it kind of fits with their overall brand message. So in that way, it kind of made sense to break the rules. So I wasn't going to push back on them like that we have to do it. I flagged it to them. I said, but when they had all the information that I felt like they needed to have, and they were still like, no, we don't want it. I was like, okay, I did my job, And the nav does show up. Once you scroll down, the nav does show up. But
and that shows that you're really good at listening to your client too. Because I mean, I know that industry. I used to work in that industry, and that's a project specifically where you could easily break that rule of CTA above the fold and stuff. Because in that industry, they don't like, it's all word of mouth, direct networking. They don't get leads from their website. Their website is just their business card and then their portfolio to send people to that are already interested. They don't need the CTA above the fold. So
exactly, like that industry is very close knit, and they don't really need to generate leads with their website in a way. They more just need to build confidence in the creative teams who are going to be searching them out, finding a effective and cool way to showcase their work, so that when they have that internal meeting, with the production team internally, that, they're one of the choices that are referred, when they're bidding the project. So it's very unique. Like that's another thing that I always like to do with my projects is like meet the situation, like, what's that expression? Like meet it where it is or whatever, meet the project where it is I don't want to come with any preconceived notions, because businesses can be very unique. And, for them to kind of, I think, put a more generic template that maybe has best practices, might take away, or not understanding really how their business works. It's like, we don't necessarily need certain things if, it doesn't work that way,
Yeah. A little bit on branding from Dale.
Yeah.
Dale is a brand designer too. A lot of this kind of back and forth for visuals, messaging, and direction is so dependent on brand, or at least should be. Yeah. Did you do all the branding on that? You did all the branding on that one, right?
On the salmon? Yeah. Yeah. Well, most basically, yeah.
Okay, I had a couple of other questions. You know what? Let me ask you this one quick. There's 10 minutes left.
Sure.
We talked about it a bit during our pre-interview. Do you have a favorite framework, since everything you do is a little bit more complicated?
Yeah, I do. I use Lumos. I feel like I've mentioned him a couple times, a big Tim Ricks fan. He has helped me out a lot, on my projects. I'm very grateful for all of his effort. And it really has leveled up how I use Webflow. Like, I really don't think that I would, be able to do the things that I do without that. So I've used Lumos from the very beginning. It's obviously gone through a lot of iterations. It is a little bit maybe because of that, it's become a bit complicated because things have really changed. But I really love the efficiency of it. I just love the way that he thinks about Webflow and how to use Webflow. So I've always found that it's kind of aligned with my goals and what I'm looking to do. So yeah, that's what I choose to use. But with that said, I haven't really dabbled into the other ones because that one has always kind of just worked for me.
Yeah. I recently started learning it, or like the latest version for a maintenance build that I'm working on, and it's very interesting. And now the spicy question: how do you integrate AI in your workflow in 2025?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess that is kind of spicy. I mostly just use it for helping me write scripts. So especially with GSAP, again, speaking about Tim, like he has, I think it's called it's a GPT within ChatGPT called FlowScript, where he had trained it on some stuff. And yeah, I use it for anything in GSAP that I don't know how to do, because I'm still, I would say, in the process of learning it. Certainly some of the more advanced things is I use AI for that. And then I would say for clients who have a bit more trouble writing is I use it for, base copywriting, like a first draft of copy for a site. I find it's very helpful for my clients, where I can already present to them like, this is what it could be. And I find that that's very helpful for them. But that's basically it. Like, there's so many tools out these days. I'm not necessarily the most on top of all of them, but I really like AI, but I like to understand things, I guess. And even from like a liability perspective, like working on a site and not fully understanding how it works, or certainly that could have any like legal ramifications. I'm not at the point that I'm comfortable leaving that all up to AI. So, I find it's a great first draft tool, even with scripts and stuff, like writing JavaScript and stuff. Yeah. It's great as a first draft, but I don't find it always does things perfectly the first time. So it's like, that's kind of how I would use it.
Yeah, I don't want to be writing every single line of code, and it's definitely been helping me write a lot of it lately. But and even I'm always kind of worried that it's going to be missing something. And even I just recently learned how to use Match Media for specifically for reduced motion preferences. Yeah. And realized ChatGPT, I was gonna get AI to help me learn it, and it just wasn't getting it. It kept doing some, it kept writing some logic, if it's present, then, or if it's enabled on the user's browser, then serve that, and otherwise serve this. You're duplicating all the code. And when I finally went and learned it the old-fashioned way, realized it was way leaner, way easier to use than what ChatGPT was coming up with. So it's still, but it's a very good little assistant to help you kind of bounce ideas and.
Yeah, and I'd love for I'm very interested in new tools, because I feel like it can make me more efficient. Again, where obviously I get more into the creative side of web, but anything, people's budgets don't necessarily aren't changing dramatically, I would say. But if we can get efficiencies, in prototyping or developing these kind of interactions and stuff, I think there's just so much more that we can do in the web, which I'm really excited about. That's kind of the stuff that I'm in, rather than like the stuff that kind of will just like make a site for you. I'm less into that kind of AI. Very impressive, but doesn't really fit with my business model, I would say. Yeah.
Everyone's back. It's Q&A time. If anyone has questions.
We're back.
We are back. I have to say, I really appreciate I know that a lot of people use animations super heavy, and they can just throw them everywhere, and there's not as much thought behind it. But every single site that that I've seen of yours is there is a purpose for every single animation. There's a reason for it to exist, not just because every headline has to appear or fade in, fade out, or whatnot. It's that's not the thing behind it. And I think there's a lot of value to really planning out the animations. And it's also a lot of effort, which I think some people take for granted. It's like, oh, you built this in Webflow, you can do like whatever. And it's just like, yeah, that's not really like, there's people that like yourself that are phenomenal at doing like these animations and stuff like that. And so I want to give props and recognize the effort. Like you were talking about 3 months of development time for like the salmon thing, right?
Yeah.
Most people would be like, oh, well, it's only this many pages, you should be able to do that and whatever, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way.
No, and that project really, there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of stuff that got kind of thrown out, like things that I would completely build and they were like, nah. And I was like, okay. It was unique, but thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And I'm honestly just glad that it comes through. I don't really talk to people about my work all that much other than my clients, but I'm really glad that comes through, because that is really my intention, is to be purposeful with animation rather than just kind of slap it on there.
Yeah. And because I know Jeremy is on a project right now where the client is a little bit misguided as to how much work goes behind the animations and things that unfortunately Webflow made it that way a little bit. It was always sold as like this easier way to do animations, while it actually requires a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, and some of them are complicated and custom code. And so, but a lot of people still think, oh, we'll do it in Webflow. It'll be easy. Here's a link. Just do something like that.
Yeah.
It's
easy to do the easy stuff, like the fade in, the text slide up. But yeah, what impact does that really add?
Yeah. Clients so often think if they've seen it on another site that it should just be something that's it's like off the shelf. You just stick it in and make it happen.
Yeah.
Preset in Webflow, probably, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any.
I have a question about, you talked about how the salmon took about 3 months, but you said that was a very sort of a different process. But with some of the other projects that you've done, what's your time frame, and how do you, sort of, like how long, and then how do you break that work down? How do you sort of come at that process?
Sure. Yeah. So for most of my work, I do design and development. That's kind of how we can achieve, obviously, the results that I'm going for. So for most of my clients, I find that the whole project will be between 3 and 4 months, from like very beginning of strategy to the site being live. And, depending on their needs, we can certainly accelerate that, or my schedule. But yeah, I just, I don't know. I'm not the most structured. It's all kind of more in my head. I don't really have like a formula or anything, but it's just kind of that same process. I get them to work on the story first. We really just work in text to begin, like in a Google Doc or whatever. Then we bring it into wireframe, like design, whatever, bring it into Figma. I'll prototype most of what I can in Figma, but for a lot of this advanced stuff, I can't. So maybe I'll prototype some of those sections in Webflow while we're still working on the design, just to test it. And then, I really feel like I've ironed out my process, especially with Lumos, that when it comes time to go from design to development, unless we're doing something that's very complicated, that process can actually be quite quick, and efficient. That's one of the things I really like about Lumos. And then QA, which, depends on the client, I guess I would say. Some clients are, do the full thing and hire like a company to do QA, which can take a long time, or for smaller businesses, unfortunately or whatnot, they're just not the budget for that. So we're just kind of doing it ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your discovery process like with a new client when you haven't worked with someone before?
Yeah. Like in terms of
pulling from them what they want the site to be, and so that you can figure, and I'm assuming that you then also help figure out architecture and linking from section to section and whatnot.
Yeah, so I always ask them if there's anything that, like, first off, if they like, what they've seen on the web, what they like, to kind of get an idea of what they're looking for. And then I will present to them, things that I find that I think can align with their brand. If it's just like specific sections of websites or references that are outside of web design, I generally like to try to expand beyond just other websites when we're thinking about things. So yeah, I'll talk with them, get a sense of what they're liking, then I'll present what I'm liking, and then we kind of just, I feel like by that point we're kind of on the same page. I don't know. That's just kind of how it works, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, there's not like, I don't know. A lot of talking.
Yeah.
Just a lot of alignment. I feel like I'm generally that works out.
Right.
I don't, yeah.
So you're not one of those, okay, well, let's have a conversation, then I'll send you a proposal and then we'll get down to work and I'll never talk to you again until I send you a link to the working site, right? Like I've seen people and I'm like, how do you work like that when you don't talk to a client?
No, yeah, I definitely like to work closely with my clients. That's even like one of the things why I didn't love advertising as much, is like in that structure, you're a creative team, art director, copywriter, then there's the account team, then there's sometimes, more senior people on that side, more senior creative people. You don't get to just sit down with the client and really understand their business and just speak to them directly. There's always these layers of communication. And I love just working directly with my clients, really understanding what they're trying to achieve with their business. And so I'll talk to my clients regularly. Like they're always in my Figma project, so they can just add comments as I'm working on it. Like I'm not protective in any way like that. I really try to just be like a member of their business, for the period of time that we're working on the project.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have, although I probably should, I'm not so strict on rounds of revisions or anything like that. It certainly got me into trouble. But you got to like your process. Like, I don't know. It's just my process. Yeah. It's certainly not the best process for maybe money making, but I've enjoyed it, I guess.
Are you happy with the work that you've done?
Yeah, for the most part, I'm like a perfectionist, So, even when we're going through the sites today, I'm like, there's other things that nothing's ever good enough. Yeah. Uh-oh.
Oh no, we all disappeared for a moment.
I don't know what just happened. Was that the thing telling us we went over a certain time on this?
I don't know.
I don't know. That was so weird. That's a new one.
Yeah.
But I think that does. So thank you so much, Mark. What's the best way for people to find you online, I guess, to contact you?
I'm a bit of a hermit, so I don't you can see there my website. Just email me directly. My website is really old, and I don't think there's like a booking thing in there that I don't think works anymore, which is not a good sign as a web developer. I'll fix that right after this call. So that, and then LinkedIn for sure. I'll do my best to get back to people on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that brings us to the end of our 26th Northern Showcase. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us and remind you to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and join us in the No Code North Lodge and in person for upcoming events. And what do we have upcoming? Oh, yeah. So we have Tony Seats is demoing something. We're gonna learn some pretty cool stuff from Tony anytime that he has things to show. It's things that either make us more efficient or are just really cool features that we can start adding for development into our projects. I'm June 6th. I'm going to be doing an accessibility workshop based on basically the fact that I believe Webflow is an excellent platform to make accessible sites with. You just have to use the right tools and the right elements for doing that. And then on June 13th, we are going to have a show and tell. Yeah.
Right. And I think we've got something else cooking for the end of the month, but it's not quite nailed down yet. So do visit our website at nocodenorth.com and sign up for our mailing list to receive all of our latest updates. You'll get links to upcoming events and you'll hear what's happening. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Join us on Fridays in the lodge, our cool gather space, and our lodge hangouts are open to everyone. We love folks coming from all over the world. In fact, we had somebody from Nigeria join us today, which was terrific. So hopefully we'll see that person in our lodge one day soon. And until next time, thanks very much, Mark, for joining us, and we'll see you around. Bye.
Thanks for having me. See ya.